I want to tell you about another podcast I think you'd really like. It's called Chutzpah. Get it? As in chutzpah, but a podcast. It's hosted by the nationally known Rabbi Shira Stutman and Hannah Rosen, a veteran public radio journalist and host of Radio Atlantic. Each week, Rabbi Shira and Hannah answer your questions through a Jewish lens. Is it okay to spoil your grandchildren? What do you do when your family's fighting about Israel? And are thruples kosher? Get the answers to those questions and more on Chutzpah, Real Life Lived Better. Hey everyone, Noam here. In case you missed it, Unpacking Israeli History is coming to Chicago on June 8th for our first ever live show, and I am so thrilled to finally announce our very special guest. And it is Dr. Michael Oren, best-selling author, historian, and politician, and his book on the Six-Day War in 1967 was so important. It has inspired me. It has educated me. I have learned so much from it, and I'm so excited to talk to him about that book and about Israeli history in general. We will be unpacking some of the most pressing questions around Israeli history, around Israeli identity and the future together, on stage, live. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. I want to see you all there. Grab your tickets now with the link in the show notes, or just go straight to Ticketmaster.com. Just search Unpacking Israeli History. And if you use the discount code UIHCHI, you can get 20% off your tickets. I'll say it one more time. Use the coupon code UIHCHI. And if you're not in Chicago, don't you worry. We got you. We're visiting a few other cities this year, so stay tuned. Chicago, yalla. Let's do this. Hey everyone, Noam here. Before we dive into today's re-release of our episode on Zionism and anti-Zionism, I want to take a moment to speak about the tragic events that unfolded last week in Washington, D.C. As Mijal and I spoke about in the bonus episode right after it happened, 2 staff members of the Israeli embassy, Yaron Lischinsky and Sarah Milgrim, were shot and killed outside the Capitol Jewish Museum as they left an event hosted by the American Jewish Committee. The suspect, Elias Rodriguez, was apprehended at the scene, and the New York Times reported that when he was taken into custody after the shooting, he told the police, "I did it for Palestine. I did it for Gaza." This horrific, despicable act of violence has been widely condemned. Yaron and Sarah were a young couple deeply committed to building bridges and fostering understanding. As some of you may have heard, Yaron had planned to propose to Sarah during an upcoming trip to Jerusalem. We already planned on re-releasing this episode, a conversation between me and Mijal about Zionism and anti-Zionism, which is always top of mind. But as I revisited our discussion in the days after the shooting, I kept thinking about how important it is to remember that these aren't just abstract concepts. Zionism, anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism. They have real-world implications. The rhetoric we use, the sentiments we express can have profound effects, sometimes leading to devastating consequences. Our hearts go out to the families of Yaron and Sarah, and to all who were affected by the senseless and awful act of hatred. Now let's return to our conversation on Zionism and anti-Zionism with a renewed commitment to understanding and empathy. Hey everyone, welcome to Wondering Jews with Mijal and Noam.
I'm Mijal.
And I'm Noam. And this podcast is our way of trying to understand the Jewish world. We don't have it all figured out. So let's figure it out together.
So, Noam, as you know, we start these conversations with questions from our listeners to get to know each other. So Jacob sent the following question. What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Jacob, I like the question. And by the way, if you have other questions, email us at wonderingjews@jewishnpack.com. Jacob, without thinking it through very quickly, I'm just going to jump in and answer right away. It's Pesach.
Oh,
Passover.
No, that's my answer.
Okay, so tell me why. Two of us don't have to answer the why. You go for it.
Passover, I'm kind of obsessed with the Passover story. And I think it's the holiday that I most connect to on a spiritual level. So that's me. It's not the food, it's the spiritual aspect.
Okay, so I love the food also. I think the food is actually very good.
Even though you're Ashkenazi, you like the food.
Even though I'm Ashkenazi, I like the food. First of all, I like matzah pizza, not the fancy stuff. I like the cardboard sauce, cheese. By the way, during COVID, when we had Passover by ourselves, just my immediate family, one of the things that we did is we let that matzah, sauce, and cheese last. It was like the Hanukkah miracle, but on Passover. It lasted for like 2 months. Our kids were pounding that. It was excellent.
Okay, so Passover because you like matzah pizza, basically?
Yeah. Is that a bad reason?
No, it's a good.
To be serious, beyond the matzah pizza, it's also the most unbelievable Jewish educational experience possible. I actually think that I view that night of telling the story of the Exodus as the anniversary of Jewish education, in the sense that that night is the night where you could really learn as parents, as young people, as teenagers, as children. You could learn what a good Jewish educational experience ought to be. It's experiential, it's inquisitive, it's curiosity-inducing. It's all these great techniques of what good education looks like.
That's awesome. I think next time we should ask, what's your least favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, that's...
We'll get better answers there.
Okay.
But now let me ask a question, not Jacob. What I want us to talk about today, Noam, is as follows. I know that there's a lot of conversations going on around like Israel, anti-Semitism, and very often questions keep coming up, at least in my circles, but I'm going to assume your circles as well, around anti-Zionism. Okay? Mm-hmm. What is anti-Zionism? Is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? All of these things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is hard for me sometimes is that people very often jump into big debates and we don't define our terms.
Yes.
So what I want us to try to do today is to try to offer like working definitions. They don't have to be perfect, but when we say the word Zionism and when we say the word anti-Zionism, what do we mean by this? Okay? And I'm not assuming we're going to agree on our definitions, and we also might change our mind or have multiple definitions, but it's just good to try to understand what are the terms that we are using.
I think that's so important. I actually personally get so annoyed when we're having conversations and debates in life, and the debate is about the meaning of the terminology, and we don't even realize that when we're having that debate. And so at the end of the debate, what could end up happening is we're all agreeing with each other. It's not a debate, it's a conversation. And if we had the clarity beforehand on what the terms meant in our own heads when we were talking about them, then we would never even be in disagreement. It's incredibly unclear, and it doesn't have to be.
Right. I think, by the way, for me, the best example for that, I don't know if you've experienced this, but the number of times that I have seen people talk about anti-Zionism, but they talk about it as though it is just criticizing Israel. Am I making sense what I'm saying right now?
It's making total sense. And I actually want to jump off of that to start my answer to your question.
Okay, go for it.
So it's going to be a 3-part answer. It's going to be what Zionism is not, what Zionism is, and then what anti-Zionism is. Can't answer what anti-Zionism is without first understanding what Zionism is. And we can't answer what Zionism is if we have a faulty definition of Zionism.
Okay, but 1 second, just to make sure that I understand. So you're saying that you're going to start by saying what Zionism isn't, but that is different than your third answer, which is what is anti-Zionism.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Go for it. It feels like a Pesach, Passover, Seder night kind of opportunity. Yeah.
So Zionism is often conflated with being pro-Israel. And that's a problem, because what it turns into is this mockery of Zionism, where the Israelis and the Palestinians are turned into teams. Am I a Red Sox fan or am I a Yankee fan? Am I a Lakers fan or am I a Clippers fan? By the way, I'm a Clippers fan.
I don't know sports, by the way, so just be careful with those metaphors.
Good point. Good point. We turn Zionism into a team sport, and it's not a team game. That's not what this is. What Zionism is not, it's not a settler colonial movement. That's not what it is. It's not created to negate Palestinian identity, and it's not something that is meant to simply parrot the Israeli government's positions on things.
Okay, 1 second now. You just said a lot of things together, and I just want to make sure that I understand, because it sounds like I didn't have a typology coming into this, but it sounds like you've put a lot of thought into this. Okay.
I think a lot about this question.
Okay, first of all, you're saying a lot of people like to say that Zionism is just being pro-Israel or pro the Israeli government is doing.
Yeah, support Israel.
Okay, support. Yes. Okay. And that's not what Zionism is. Then you said Zionism is also, you mentioned the word settler colonial state.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by settler colonial state in this context is an entity, a sovereignty, a government that was created from another government to extend the hegemony of that government in order to make more money for that government in order to create a larger empire. That's not what Zionism is.
Okay, so you're saying Zionism is not this colonialist project.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Right. And I'm defining a colonialist project as a project that one government created, let's say the British government or the American government or the French government. And the goal of that government was to go across the world to make more money by being in all of these different places, all these different countries. And the goal of the colonists would be to make more money for that government. That is not the goal of Zionism.
Okay, good.
Okay.
By the way, a different episode, Noam, we should talk about different definitions of like colonialism, settler colonialism, and all those things.
Great. Yeah, and I'm not claiming, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are listening like, wait, there's a lot more to colonialism. And didn't certain early Zionists describe what they were building as colonies? Yes, yes, and yes. But you're right. It should be a whole separate episode about what we mean by colonies. But here's what Zionism is.
Okay.
Here's how I view Zionism. Okay. Zionism is the activation of the Jewish people on the world stage. That's what Zionism is. And I'm very careful with my language here. I am saying that Zionism is the returning of the Jewish people to the world stage as actors and not simply in the crowd.
Wait, no, I'm still not sure that I understand or agree with what you just said.
Okay.
So you're saying Zionism is that the Jews return as actors to the world stage.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're saying that it's Jews who are deciding to act in history, to basically like shape their own destiny. So are you talking about an ideology, a historical moment? Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'm describing an ideology, and the ideology was a great debate between, and I don't know if they ever like said, hey, you and I are debating it this way, and this is our analysis of the debate, but between two great thinkers, okay? Theodor Herzl and Ahad Ha'am. These were two great early Zionist thinkers. Zionism was doing one of two things. It was either solving the problem of the Jews, or it was solving the problem of Judaism.
Okay. What do you mean by the problem of the Jews and the problem of Judaism?
Okay. So for Herzl, what it means is solving the problem of the Jews was there was so much anti-Semitism in the world, like an insane amount, not Holocaust anti-Semitism. People like to talk about, well, if there was no Holocaust, there would be no Jewish state, right? But no, it's actually much more than that. Years, decades before the Holocaust, there was so much anti-Semitism that Theodor Herzl said, the Jews cannot be successful as people. They cannot go into the world and achieve. And the only way to solve that problem was to create sovereignty. He cared less about it being in the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. Not that he didn't care about it. He did care about it, but he cared less about that. He cared about making sure that the Jewish people were able to have political sovereignty. And if you could give the Jewish people political sovereignty, then you could solve the problem of the Jews.
Okay, so let's just recap. So we're talking about 19th century Western Europe, tons of anti-Semitism in societies that were supposed to have been more enlightened, more emancipated. You're not supposed to have this problem anymore. And when you say Herzl believed in political sovereignty as the answer to this, what do you mean by that?
Well, he thought that the reason that the Jewish people were hated so much is because they were unlike everyone. And if they could simply be like everyone else, and they wouldn't just be ghosts in the crowd, that anti-Semitism would disappear. He genuinely believed that anti-Semitism would be ended with the creation of the Jewish state.
Yeah, it's so funny now. I always find it so bittersweet to think about Herzl's kind of like dreams and the state of Israel today.
Why?
Because on the one hand, as a Zionist, and I haven't defined it yet, I do believe the state of Israel is one of the great protectors of Jewish life and one of the great responses to anti-Semitism. But it is also absolutely the opposite of what Herzl expected and hoped for.
Yeah.
Herzl basically expected that if, and he was also speaking, let's just acknowledge, at a time of like a lot of like nationalism.
Yeah.
So he expected if Jews have nationalism, if we're not just always this minority, but we actually have a state, if we are, in your language, political actors, then we're not going to be hated. And I mean, sitting here in 2024, right? We're in 2024.
Yeah, that's where we are.
That's where we are. And so much of what I would see as anti-Semitism today really stems from, hatred towards that one Jewish state. So I always find it really bittersweet.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of these examples of, with the other great question that we've asked, is anti-Semitism something that will always exist, or is it just contingent on certain historical moments and realities? It makes me feel like the answer to that question is it will always express itself in different ways, but we're not answering whether or not anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism just yet. That's a separate conversation. It's a broader conversation.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for you to define Zionism. So yeah, go for it.
Okay, so let me continue. Okay, I'm going to get us there because one definition of Zionism is what I already gave you about the activation of the Jewish people returning as political actors, and what Zionism was trying to accomplish. What Herzl wanted to accomplish was to solve the problem of the Jews. Achad Ha'am had a totally different view of it.
Who was Achad Ha'am?
Achad Ha'am was a great thinker in the late 19th century, a Zionist thinker, early Zionist, poet. Achad Ha'am was, in some ways, the soul of the Zionist movement. That's the way I'm going to view him and talk about him right now. And he looked at someone like Herzl, and he said, whoa, there is nothing interesting about Jewish sovereignty if the Jewish state is not producing Jewish culture, okay? Zionism is not merely there to create a new state, but Zionism is there to create a new sort of Judaism. And that new sort of Judaism would be something that would have as its spiritual or cultural epicenter the Jewish people coming together and saying, let's create Jewish culture, Hebrew ideas, Hebrew language. And so maybe this is a not fair reading of Herzl, but the Zionism that Herzl was about was create the new state. And if you create the new state, then it'll solve the problem of anti-Semitism. It'll solve the problem for the Jews. Achad Ha'am wasn't interested in that. He thought Judaism was problematic in many ways, and the way to solve the problem of Judaism, to give it more life, more oomph, more culture, was the activation of Jewish culture, of Jewish ideas.
Well, it's also to take it out of like a diaspora minority experience. If you can have a home for Jews, you can actually have a different type of Judaism, right?
Wait, say that. Explain that.
I think I'm adding to what you're saying about Achad Ha'am.
Yeah.
That part of the reason that Achad Ha'am is a Zionist is that he believes that once you are in your own Jewish state, Jewish home, you have majority Jewish culture, right? You can actually create a more vibrant type of Judaism that you could in like a village in Russia. You know what I mean? Where you don't have autonomy and ability to do things. Okay, so right now, Noam, so we have Herzl, people I think identifying with like political Zionism, solving for anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Achad Ha'am trying to create flourishing, vibrant Judaism.
Yeah. So I'm telling you what I mean when I say I'm a Zionist.
Okay.
What I mean when I say I'm a Zionist is I want the Jewish people to be activated. I view Zionism as a verb. It's something that you do. You get out and you accomplish. You make things happen. You're part of the world. You don't passively just let the world happen to you. That's what it means to be Zionist. That's how I understand it. And yes, of course, it's tied to the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people, which is the land of Israel. And that's certainly how it's developed over time. But it's so much more than just simply saying, I support Israel. Of course, I support Israel. Yes, I support Israel. Do I support every Israeli policy? No. And what I've seen from people, Mijal, is that people feel they have permission to be a Zionist when they don't simply have to agree with every single thing that comes out of the government or any government.
Okay, but wait a second now. I'm going to disagree or push back a little bit for a second.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I didn't know we were going to disagree on what it means to be a Zionist. I thought this was reserved for the anti-Zionism part of the conversation.
Okay.
You're basically saying to be a Zionist is to believe that Jews have political agency and Jews should control their own destiny. But
yes, but their own destiny, which I think is deeply and intrinsically connected to the Jewish state.
Yeah, but once you make that your definition of Zionism, most people would agree with that. Jews should control their own destiny. Even people who call themselves anti-Zionists. So I'm do you have your own definition that no one else agrees? I'm just curious. Have you used this definition with people?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it means to use it with people, but that's how I think of it. I think it's the act.
Do you feel comfortable having a definition that not everybody else does?
Yes, I do.
Because you have agency because you're a Zionist.
I'm a Zionist. I really don't think it's simply me being like, hey, I have a totally different definition. Because I think the only way to activate your identity is to have the Jewish state, because the Jewish state in the Jewish homeland with the Jewish people, that's when you connect the soul and the body together.
Okay.
And so I deeply believe in it because of that. That is what Zionism is.
Okay, well, it's
the activation of all of it.
Okay, you just added like a layer to it that we should acknowledge, okay? This makes it a little bit less capacious, right? So it's about activating Jewish political agency, right? Being agents shaping our destiny and doing so through the Jewish state, in a place where the body and the soul, the Herzl and the Chada'am can live together.
Yeah. So, Mijal, tell me not where we disagree, but tell me, just assert your definition of Zionism.
Okay, well, a couple of things. First of all, Sephardic Jews, and I'm Sephardic, Middle Eastern, we yearned for Zion. And, we didn't have Herzl and Chadam. We had other rabbis and other thinkers who advocated for Zion in different ways. So I don't think of political Zionism as like the only type of Zionism. But I'll tell you something, Noam, and it's a little bit raw, and I might disagree with myself in a couple of weeks.
That's the best.
That's the best. Yes, we have permission.
We have permission to change our minds.
Yes, we have a mandate. That sounds even better.
Wow.
So I have been wondering if trying to give such beautiful, elegant, thoughtful, thorough definitions of Zionism. Sorry. No, you are the problem. You are the problem.
Okay. Go for it. Go for it. Yeah, let me hear.
No, like with all of the conversations that are happening right now, and it's like, are you a Zionist? Aren't you? What's the ideology? Tell me the history. I'm like, for me to be a Zionist means that the state of Israel was founded in 1948, and that if I could go backwards and I had two choices for history to go forth with the state of Israel happening or not go forth with it being established, that I would say, yes, go forth. Okay? That is my definition of Zionism. It's a minimalist definition of Zionism.
Much clearer, more and simpler than mine. So thank you for that.
But thank you for affirming that, Noam.
By the way, not simple and like stupid, like simplistic. I mean, like simple and clear. So thank you.
No worries. No, so I think for me, it's like a little bit clear, and it cuts through some of the noise. Because there's noise of people saying, well, I disagree with the ideology, or there's always been Jewish anti-Zionist, or there's all of those things. And for me, it's just pretty simple. Like, there is a state, there are people in this state. It's a Jewish state, okay? So let's not ignore that. You could go backwards. Should it go forth? Should it not? And then today, how do you live based on that? Because for me, this actually ends up helping define anti-Zionist, right? And I hate, by the way, when people are like, well, anti-Zionism isn't so bad because you should critique the state of Israel. I'm like, every Zionist critiques the state of Israel.
Right.
Like every day of the week. You know what I mean? Like we all critique the state of Israel, the government, like that's all we do.
Yeah.
But and then anti-Zionism is basically the kind of attitude that wishes the state of Israel wasn't created and supporting any sort of action or dialogue or whatever to go backwards in history and change that. That's where I am right now in terms of my definition.
Yeah, I think your definition is a great definition.
Thank you.
I think it works. And I want to pick up on something earlier that you said, because I think we went a little too quickly past it, where you talked about the Sephardic connection to Zionism, the yearning for Zion, the yearning for Jerusalem, the yearning for Israel, before and also simultaneously to Herzl and the other great early Zionists in the late 19th, early 20th century. The reason I want to talk about that is I want to go to Herzl's text where
Can
he
we
talks
put it in
about,
the show notes if we want for everybody to follow?
Yeah, let's put it in the show notes. Der Judenstaat, which is either translated as the Jewish state or the Jews' state, if you want to be really nerdy. And Herzl writes the following: the idea which I have developed in this pamphlet is a very old one. It is the restoration of the Jewish state. I just love that one sentence because it's exactly what you're saying, Mijal. It really is. The point is that it's not that Herzl was coming up with this new idea. It's called Zionism. That's how people talk about it, that there was like the Jewish world existed, there was history, and all of a sudden Herzl comes and he's like, oh, I got an idea, world. Here's the idea. It's called Zionism, where the Jewish people are going to create a Jewish state. His point is, Mijal, what? You live in, wherever you live, Syria, Lebanon, Algeria, Tunisia, Iraq, Iran. We know that the Jewish people have always had an old idea, which is the restoration of the Jewish state.
Yeah.
What do you think of
No,
that?
yes, that it's funny. I was speaking with a friend of mine a couple of days ago. We're putting together some classes on like Israel and Zionism, and I was being a little bit pedantic because he was going to teach Herzl, and I said, well, that is the emergence of political Zionism. He's like, just call it Zionism. I'm like, no, I want to call it political Zionism. He disagreed with me, whatever. I said, I want to call it political Zionism because to me, it's new, but based on something very old, which is the yearning of the Jews for Zion. And also the fact that we have, like, in Jewish history, we've had Jewish commonwealths, Jewish kingdoms. We had Jewish national home in the land of Israel. So 100% with you there. It's a new idea based on an old yearning and an old history.
Yeah, the reason I love Herzl, by the way, 3 letters. The 3 letters are GSD. Get stuff done. And that's what Herzl did. He was someone who got stuff done. There were many other Zionist thinkers, and there were great rabbinic leaders who always yearned for Zion, who moved themselves and their families, and whether it's Yehuda Halevi or who lived like 1,000 years before him, or Nachmanides, Ramban, who lived 1194 to 1270, and another great rabbi, the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Elijah Kramer. Also, weird bit of knowledge, know his years as well, 1720 to 1797.
I think that's your talent, right? To know the dates of every single major Zionist thinker.
But anyway, they all moved to Israel. They love it. They love the Jewish state. They didn't have Zionism, proto-Zionism, whatever.
They had no Jewish state.
They didn't have a Jewish state. By the way, neither did Herzl. But Herzl gathered people together, and he made it happen. He made it happen. So for me, the definition of anti-Zionism,
that's what I was going to get to, by the way, because you were going to forget that.
Yeah, 100% I was going to forget it. But I was thinking about it in the context of that very simple sentence. The idea which I have developed in this pamphlet is a very old one. It's the restoration of the Jewish state. And then he says this: we have honestly endeavored everywhere to merge ourselves in the social life of surrounding communities and to preserve the faith of our fathers. We are not permitted to do so. In vain are we loyal patriots, our loyalty in some places running to extremes. In vain do we make the same sacrifices of life and property as our fellow citizens. In vain do we strive to increase the fame of our native land in science and art, or her wealth by trade and commerce. And I read that 120 plus years later, and I'm thinking, to be an anti-Zionist is to be someone who doesn't understand just how much the Jewish people need the Jewish state. That's what it is. How could you not realize how badly the Jewish people need to affirm their selfhood through autonomy, through self-determination, through the construction of Hebrew culture? Like, that is what it means to be a Zionist, and yes, to be a safe haven from the rabid anti-Semitism that has always existed and continues to exist today.
But no, okay, 1 second.
Yeah.
So for you, anti-Zionism is basically not recognizing, using Herzl's language, that the extent and potency of anti-Semitism, even in enlightened societies, requires... No, am I saying it wrong?
No, you're saying it right, but it's more than that. To me, what I'm getting at,
this
I'm not
is all
being constructed. It's the negation of Jewish identity to me. That's really what it is.
Why? I want to understand, because I don't think I think I have just a different definition, but why is it the negation of Jewish identity?
Because you cannot have a full, healthy Jewish identity without the creation of the Jewish state. For all the reasons I spoke about before, which is the restoration of the Hebrew language and Hebrew culture, which I do not think would have had emerged without the Jewish state. Of the very fact that 46% of world Jewry right now lives in Israel because they came, people in the United States often have this United States-centric approach to life, but they came from Kyiv, they came from Addis in Ethiopia, they came from, different parts of North Africa and the Middle East, and that's where they came from. And they all came to this one state where they were able to assert their own full Jewish identity. And they were trying to say, we have endeavored so hard for so many years to be loved. Just love me. And eventually, maybe people will and maybe people won't. But eventually, the point was, you got to do this yourself. You got to do this in your own land. in your historical ancestral land. And there are going to be things that people are not going to like about what you do. And you're not going to do things that are great all the time. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make errors. You're going to make moral, ethical lapses. You're going to have those. And also, you're going to be creating your own identity. And so the negation of that identity is the problem that I have.
Okay. The one flaw with it is that people could just really disagree with you about what a healthy Jewish identity looks like, right?
That's fair. What's yours? What's yours?
My what?
What is your definition of a healthy Jewish identity?
Oh, I didn't prepare that. I prepared anti-Zionism. Just kidding.
A healthy national Jewish identity. How could you have a healthy national Jewish identity without the Jewish state?
Well, again, can I play devil's advocate without agreeing with myself for a second? I'm just going to...
Yes, of course.
We had anti-Zionist Jews of all stripes and forms throughout history. I mean, in the last 100 years. We can talk about like religious anti-Zionism, political... No, I'm not an anti-Zionist. I'm a proud Zionist.
Okay.
So let me just express why I think we have different notions here. And I actually want to tease out when is your approach helpful and when is my helpful. Because I think they can be helpful at different moments. Okay? I think for me right now, it does feel like there's battles that are happening, whether I like it or not. I think that October 7th, to me, I have no way but to interpret it vis-a-vis October 8th and like the crazy rise of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. So for me, I want to have like a clear definition that explains why I'm against anti-Zionism. And to me, this is a debate in which there's millions of Jews on the line and Jewish lives on the line, and in which we saw October 7th, what that could look like. And this is why I'm not only am I not an anti-Zionist, but I think it's deeply, deeply dangerous. Because it's basically like an attempt to say 1948 was wrong and we want to go back and try to like undo some of that.
Yeah.
So that's where I think mine is helpful. Like I can tell you where I think yours is helpful. Yeah.
But let me pause you for a second. I think that's incredibly helpful. I think it's incredibly important. I love it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Noam. But what mine doesn't do, which yours does, and by the way, I'm not always going to do this, like, make both of ours sound good. Yours is terrible.
So you're saying this is it. This is so okay. So today I get to hear from Mijal be told why my definition of something was not exclusively bad. Go for it.
Sure, I'll give it my best shot now.
Okay.
No. I think what you're doing right now is almost what I would like to do when I'm not caught up in October 7th and anti-Semitism and like fear, which is like an aspirational vision, which is, hey, Zionism is not only about, fighting our battles, it's literally about a healthy Jewish identity. And the fact that you asked me that question, I'm like, oh, 1 second, I need to think about this. Maybe it says a little bit about me and like responding to this moment right now that I don't feel like I'm fully there all the time. Mm-hmm. But I think that that's like a helpful moment to think about the Zionist project, not only about kind of like establishing Israel, defending it, but about shaping history, having a healthy Jewish identity, having our bodies and our souls and our history, the old and the new, kind of connected to each other. What's your takeaway, Noam? What's your takeaway?
My takeaway is that I think that your simplification of are you happy with 1948 or are you not happy with 1948? I think that's a very helpful framing for the question of are you a Zionist? Are you an anti-Zionist? I think it's a really helpful framing. It's simple and not simplistic. It's straightforward and it's clear. And I do want to make the pitch, as I'm thinking about this, is that Zionism is a whole world view. And because of that, it's hard for me personally to just jump into like these very straightforward, simple definitions of what Zionism is, when I think that it's a huge identity question. And when something's a huge identity question, I think it's really important for all of us to explore what it means when we say we are that thing. We are Zionists. Well, what does that mean? So that's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway.
Yeah, maybe one takeaway, like I wonder if we actually just need multiple definitions for different things. If I'm having like a quick conversation or even argument when I need to quickly define Zionism, and often like it's in the context of contemporary events, then I think having like a simple, quick, I would call it very minimalist definition is helpful. But I think if I'm learning or if I'm trying to grow or if I'm engaging like in Jewish community building, then or if I'm chatting with you, Noam, who knows all the dates by heart, then actually having this like more like thick, complex, nuanced understanding of the history, the complexity, the layers, and how these layers kind of like add to our lives, that's really helpful. So maybe we should just like not have different definitions for different contexts. That might be one way to think about it. But also this conversation is just the beginning. Like we're just beginning to touch a little bit of some of like the huge, we didn't even, we did not touch on anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. That's like huge.
Anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. I can't wait to discuss that with you. That's going to come up in a next episode. Fine. And then what else?
Also, we didn't touch, you know what? Like, how do we relate to anti-Zionists that we know? Like, it's not only theoretical, it's also communal. Like, how do you make, communal lines? So there's like a whole lot of questions that we can really go into, that we should go into from here.
I agree. I just am incredibly thankful for Zionism, and I'm going to leave it at that.
That's okay.
I am. Listen, I am. I'm thankful for Zionism.
I thought you were going to say I'm incredibly thankful to be in this conversation with you.
Well, I'm also thankful to having the conversation with you, and for not getting exclusively a bad rating on things that I said today. So that's actually I'm a winner tonight. But listen, I want to make sure people email us at wonderingjews@jewishnunpacked.com, because we love the questions that are coming in, and we want to explore a lot of questions together. We're going to be doing this every single week, so lots to unpack and explore together.
Send questions, send feedback, send thoughts, send interesting dates in Jewish history, anything.
I must be a lot of fun to hang out with at parties. Like a lot of fun.
Wandering Jews with Mijal and Noam is a production of Unpacked, a division of OpenDor Media.
Subscribe to Wandering Jews wherever you're listening to this pod, and follow Unpacked at all the social media places. Just look for @JewishUnpacked.
Email us at our new and improved email address, wanderingjews@unpacked.media. That's wanderingjews@unpacked.media. This episode was hosted by me, Michal Biton.
And me, Noam Weissman.
Hona Dodge is our researcher, Rob Farah is our audio editor,
and we are produced by Michael Weber.